it today. Lesson 32. To start this lesson, we're going to take a look at some new time signatures that you haven't yet run into. They're all forms of simple time. If you're still not altogether clear about the difference between simple and compound time, then before going any further, turn back to your Lesson 14 booklet and read pages 157 and 158, where it's explained for you. So far, all the pieces you've played in simple time have had a time signature with the denominator, the bottom figure, 4, meaning that there is 1 beat for every crotchet, half a beat for every quaver, 2 beats for a minim, and so on. But, as you can see on the first page of your Lesson 32 booklet, page 373, this isn't necessarily so. The denominator can be either 2 or 8 instead of 4, giving you 3/8 time in place of 3/4, for instance, or 2/2 time instead of 2/4. So what does this mean in practice? Well, on pages 374 and 375, you'll find the implications of 2/2 and 3/8 time spelt out for you. 2/2 is a simple duple time. Just as the 4/4 time signature can be replaced by a letter C, 2/2 is often indicated by a C with a line through it. There are 2 beats to each bar, and each beat lasts for 1 minim. So crotchets now only make half a beat, and quavers a quarter beat. As a result, you count crotchets 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and you count quavers dabba 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 dabba. In effect, you could say that the time value of each note is halved. A minim is now worth 1 beat instead of 2, a crotchet half a beat instead of a whole beat, and so on. In 3/8 time, the reverse happens. It's exactly like 3/4 time, except that the time value of each note is doubled. Quavers take the place of crotchets, and semiquavers replace quavers. So the quavers count as full beats. 1, 2, 3. And the semiquavers count as half beats. 1 and 2 and 3 and. Where in 3/4 time we would have semiquavers, in 3/8 we get demi-semiquavers. This new type of note shouldn't cause you any problems. Just as a semiquaver is half the time value of a quaver and has 2 hooks to its tail instead of 1, so the demi-semiquaver is half the value of a semiquaver and has yet another hook, making a total of 3. Now, all this may seem a lot to take in, but really it's very simple. If you look at the examples A, B and C at the bottom of page 375, you'll see that they are 3 different ways of writing exactly the same piece of music. Let's start with A in 2/4 time, that is 2 crotchet beats to the bar. The metronome is set at 66, and we're going to play a crotchet to each metronome beat. Example B is in 2/2 time. Notice the C with the line through it as time signature. Here we have 2 minim beats to the bar, crotchets instead of quavers, and quavers instead of semiquavers. But, with the metronome still set at 66, and playing 1 minim to each metronome beat, we get exactly the same final result as in example A. Finally, example C is in 2/8 time, 2 quaver beats to each bar. So we get quavers, where in example A we had crotchets, semiquavers, where in A there were quavers, and demi-semiquavers in place of semiquavers. But the result is once again exactly the same. Our solo piece for this lesson is the first movement of Clementi's Sonatina, opus 36, number 1. It's written in 2/2 time, 2 minim beats to the bar, and marked to be played allegro, fast and lively. You'll find some of the fingering quite tricky at full speed, so do practice slowly for a good while until you're really sure of the notes. And be careful to bring out the contrast between the legato and staccato notes in both hands. Before we hear the sonatina, just one word of warning about the rhythm. Don't make the mistake of thinking that 2/2 time is identical to 4/4. They are very similar, and you could play this piece as if it was in 4/4 time without making an absolute mess of it. There wouldn't be anything too obviously wrong. But in 2/2 time, the rhythm is subtly different. Counting 2 beats to the bar instead of 4 makes the music sound slightly faster, with more spring in it. Listen to the sonatina now. Now, to continue our series on dance rhythms, we're going to look at an old favourite from the 1920s, the Foxtrot. This traditionally has an accompaniment with the same alternating tonic-dominant bass that you learnt to use for the waltz in Lesson 31. But whereas the waltz is in 3/4 time, the Foxtrot is in 4/4. Here's a typical Foxtrot theme. Example A on page 378. Now let's add a left-hand accompaniment using the alternating tonic-dominant bass. Interpretation 1. We can add some variety to this in a number of ways. For instance, in the last 2 bars, where the melody consists of a C held through 8 beats, let's liven up the accompaniment by having the bass notes move note by note down the scale, like this. We can do the same thing in reverse, with the bass notes moving up the scale. Or another variant. You don't always have to stick to the notes of the major scale either. Sometimes you can move the bass notes up chromatically, a semitone at a time, like this. Here's the same thing but moving down the keyboard. So now let's try our second interpretation, which incorporates some of these little tricks. This way the accompaniment is a lot more fun. We'll also add a few notes from the chords to the right-hand part. Finally, here's a version with both hands playing the accompaniment. The chords are in the right hand, the bass notes in the left. The Tarantella is a very lively traditional dance from Naples in the south of Italy. It's written in 6/8 time, 2 beats to the bar, with 3 quavers to each beat. The same principle of the alternating bass applies to the Tarantella as it does to the waltz and the Foxtrot. Let's hear what it sounds like. Example B on page 380. The same rhythm is also used in folk songs and ballads, with a slower, more lyrical effect. Example C. The left-hand accompaniment can be simplified by replacing the chord with a single note, either the dominant or the root note. It sounds like this. Finally, here's a Tarantella accompaniment for 2 hands. Now that you've tried out the Tarantella rhythm, you're ready for our piece with backing orchestra for this lesson, a typical Neapolitan Tarantella. This is a fairly simple piece of music, but you won't find it easy, because it has to be played at a very lively speed. As usual, the secret is to practice slowly at first, only building up speed gradually. Probably the most difficult thing when playing along with the backing is to count yourself in correctly. The piece starts with 4 bars from the orchestra before you join in with a series of bass notes and chords. You'll find it takes a few attempts before you come in at the right place, simply because the orchestra is playing so fast that counting is more difficult than usual. You have the same problem again halfway through the piece at the bottom of page 382, where you play 4 bars of tied dotted minims, followed by 3 bars of the orchestra alone, before you come in again on the second beat of the next bar. You'll need to count really carefully here to keep in time with the backing. Remember that as the Tarantella is in 6/8 time, you always count 2 beats to the bar. There are lots of repeats that we'll just run through quickly now. The central section between the double bar lines on the first page, page 381, is repeated once. The second time through, of course, you skip the bar marked 1 and go straight on to the bar marked 2. The central section of page 382 is played 3 times. And the same goes for the next repeated section, starting on the last bar of page 382 and ending on the first bar of the second line on page 383. This section is played 3 times as well. Finally, the section from the bottom of page 383 to the top of page 384 is repeated once, again skipping the bar marked 1 the second time through. This all sounds dreadfully complicated, so let's hear the whole piece now. Follow it through in the written music, and you'll soon see how the repeats go. Tarantella with keyboard and backing. One thing you'll probably have noticed is how the keyboard blends back into the orchestral sound when it's playing bass notes and chords, in the first 7 bars of the keyboard part, for instance, and then it rings out clearly when it starts playing the melody. You'll also have noticed the change of key signature, 2 bars from the end of page 382. The 3 flats are cancelled, only to return halfway down the next page. In fact, all of this tarantella is written in minor keys. The 3 flats are C minor, and the central section with no key signature is in A minor. You'll be learning about minor keys in a few lessons' time. As far as technique goes, you shouldn't find anything in this tarantella too difficult, as long as you practice properly at slow speed from the start. Follow the fingering exactly as it's written, including the frequent changes of finger when you play a succession of identical notes. In the 3rd line of music on the first page, for example, when you skip back and forwards between the 2nd and 3rd fingers in the right hand. This isn't designed just to make life more difficult for you. It is in fact the only way to make sure you bring out the sharp, lively tarantella rhythm. So, to end this lesson, here is the backing for tarantella without the keyboard part.